It was right in the middle of summer when this happened. My parents had gone away for the weekend to our house in Cape Cod, which was only about a 2-hour drive, so it wasn't unusual for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had left me a bunch of food in the fridge, pulled pork, some pasta, and a bit of cash in case I wanted to order pizza. I wasn't worried at all. I was 17, had the whole house to myself, and all I planned on doing was staying up late and playing Xbox. That first night was great. I stayed up till almost 3 in the morning gaming, blasting music, eating junk food, and just enjoying the silence. When I finally woke up the next day, it was already past 1 in the afternoon. I'd made plans to meet some friends at 3 for street hockey, so I jumped in the shower, still half asleep, and scrolling through my phone like I always do. When I shower alone, especially when my parents aren't home, I tend to take my time. 40, maybe 45 minutes go by before I even realize how long I've been in there. I was watching a video when I suddenly heard something, the sound of the back door opening. It's an old wooden door, heavy, and it makes a very distinct creak when it moves. My whole body froze. The bathroom is right above the back door, and I knew I was supposed to be the only one in the house. At first, I didn't even breathe. I stood there with the water still running, just listening. After about 2 minutes of silence, I tried to convince myself that maybe the wind had caught it, or maybe my parents came home early. Still, something felt off. I turned off the water, grabbed my towel, and quietly stepped out. Our staircase from the second floor to the kitchen is narrow and closed off. You can't see into the kitchen until you're at the very bottom. Every step creaks, and the house being as old as it is, you can't sneak anywhere without making noise. But I tried. I moved slowly, taking one step at a time, trying not to even breathe too loud. By the time I reached the second to last step, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I paused there, taking a quick breath to calm myself down, and told myself I was being paranoid. There was no reason for anyone to be in the kitchen. Then, trying to shake it off, I laughed under my breath at how ridiculous I was being, took the last 2 steps normally, and turned the corner. That's when I saw him. There, in the middle of my kitchen, stood a man. Just standing there, 2 feet away from me, staring directly into my eyes with this frozen smile stretched across his face. I don't even know how to explain what I saw. He wasn't moving, wasn't saying anything, just smiling. But what stuck with me the most wasn't his face. It was his arms. They weren't hanging naturally at his sides. They were twisted behind him at this weird, unnatural angle, rotated in a way that didn't even seem possible. It was so wrong-looking that it made my stomach turn. I think I stopped breathing for a second. Then, before I could even think, I stepped forward and punched him, right in the jaw. It was more of a desperate swing than an actual punch, but the force made him stumble back. I didn't wait to see what he did next. I dropped my towel, sprinted up the stairs naked, and slammed my bedroom door shut. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me a few tries to turn the lock. Then I pushed a chair under the handle just like you see in movies. I called 911 with my hands trembling, barely able to get the words out. The operator was trying to calm me down, asking if I could describe the man, but all I could say was that there was someone in my house. Then, as I sat there pressed against the floor, still holding the phone, I noticed something. The light under my door, it disappeared. The floorboards outside creaked softly. I realized he was standing right outside my room. I couldn't move. I couldn't even talk. I just sat there staring at the bottom of the door, watching the faint shadow of his feet shifting ever so slightly. The operator kept saying, "Sir? Sir? Are you there?" But I was frozen. Every sound, every creak, made my stomach twist tighter. After what felt like forever, the light came back. I heard the floorboards creak again, this time slowly moving away. Then silence. I didn't dare move until I heard the banging on the front door and someone shouting, "Police!" When I finally opened my door, 2 officers were standing in the hallway. I must have looked insane, shaking and half-dressed, but the relief that hit me was overwhelming. They searched the house, every room, every closet, even the basement. But whoever that man was, he was gone, completely vanished. Since then, my parents refused to leave me alone overnight. I still double-check every door and window before bed, and I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night convinced I can hear that creaking again. The police never found him, and I never got an explanation for who he was or what he wanted. It happened a few years ago in a quiet, rural part of the UK. My friend Zara, who worked as a small-time influencer, had just had her second child. Her husband had gone on a short golf trip with his friends, something he often did, leaving Zara alone with the kids. She was used to it, but this particular weekend was different. It was late October, one of those stormy nights where thunder seemed to echo through the walls, and every gust of wind sounded like a whisper outside the window. She told me she started feeling uneasy as the evening went on. The house sat on the edge of a long country road, surrounded by fields, with no close neighbors. By 9 o'clock, the rain had turned into a downpour, and she was just finishing her cup of coffee in the kitchen after putting both kids to bed. She'd done her usual routine, checked the locks, made sure the windows were shut, and then noticed something strange. The back door was slightly ajar. At first, she thought maybe she hadn't shut it all the way earlier. But before she could even reach for the handle, she felt this sudden dizziness sweep over her. Her vision blurred, her legs gave out, and everything went black. When she came to, she was sitting upright in one of her own kitchen chairs, breathing hard through her nose. It took a few seconds for her to realize why. Her mouth was sealed shut with duct tape. Panic set in almost instantly. She tried to move, but her arms were taped tightly behind the chair, and her ankles were bound together. Her heart was pounding so hard she said she could feel it in her ears. Then, with a faint click, the overhead light flicked on. Standing in front of her was a man wearing a dark hoodie and a scarf over his mouth. He was calm, eerily calm. His voice was muffled but firm when he spoke. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "Just tell me, do you keep money in the house?" Zara tried to answer, but all that came out was a desperate, muffled sound behind the tape. The man took that as a no and began moving around the kitchen, collecting things, her jewelry, her husband's watch, whatever seemed valuable. He stuffed everything into a large black duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Then, as he moved toward the door, he stopped. His next words chilled her to her core. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "Your kids are still asleep." That single sentence hit her harder than anything else. The thought that this stranger had been close enough to her children to know they were asleep nearly broke her. Before leaving, he turned back to her and said, almost softly, "I'm sorry for this." Then he disappeared into the storm outside. Zara sat frozen for a few seconds before twisting her face enough to peel the tape from her mouth. Once she got it off, she screamed for help, even though she knew no one could hear her. After struggling and tearing at the tape for what felt like forever, she finally managed to free her hands. She sprinted upstairs to check on her kids. They were both still asleep, untouched. The police arrived not long after she called them. They found fingerprints, and later that week, they caught the man. It turned out he had known who Zara was from her online presence. He told the police he'd been following her for a while, knew her husband was away, and had planned the break-in carefully. He'd even drugged her coffee before sneaking in through the back door. That's why she fainted so suddenly. He claimed he was desperate, said he'd lost his business and didn't want to hurt anyone, but that didn't change what he'd done. Zara recovered, at least physically, but something like that leaves a mark you can't just forget. She told me later that even though she pitied the man for what drove him to that point, she could never shake the feeling of being watched when she was home alone. Even now, years later, every creak of the house or gust of wind outside still makes her heart race. This happened back in the early 2000s, when I was about 12 years old. My dad had passed away 2 years before, and it was just my mom, my older sister, and me. To help me cope, my mom took me to an animal shelter to adopt a dog, something I'd wanted for as long as I could remember. That's where I found him, a small shepherd husky mix, curled up in the corner of his cage, shy but with the kindest eyes. I knew right away he was the one. We named him Max. By the time this happened, he was about a year old, close to 90 pounds, and basically my best friend. My mom worked night shifts, and my sister often took advantage of that by going out with her friends, leaving me home alone. I never complained. It meant I could stay up late playing video games without her bossing me around. We lived in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids played outside until dark. I never really felt unsafe until that night. It was one of those warm summer nights when the house felt still. I was in the living room, controller in hand, when I got thirsty and decided to grab something to drink. Our kitchen had a clear view of the backyard through the glass door, and as I passed by, I noticed that the garage door was wide open. I figured I must have forgotten to close it after putting my bike away earlier, so without thinking much of it, I headed outside to shut it. Max was downstairs in the basement, his favorite spot during the summer because of the cool concrete floor. I didn't think to call him up. It was just a quick errand. I stepped outside barefoot and had barely made it 5 steps into the yard when I saw it. Movement inside the garage. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was dark, and the shadows seemed to shift with the flickering light from the street lamp. But then I saw it clearly. A crouched figure, rummaging through something in the corner. I froze. My brain was still trying to process what I was looking at when the figure stood up. A man. He turned toward me, and I knew right away that he saw me too. The porch light above my head illuminated me perfectly while he remained half hidden in the shadows. Then, without warning, he started running toward me. For a second, I couldn't move. I opened my mouth, but what came out wasn't even a scream, more like a strangled yelp of panic. But that was all it took. From inside the house, I heard a deep growl, followed by the thunder of paws on the floor. Max burst through the open door behind me, fur bristling, teeth bared, and this guttural snarl that made even me flinch. The man stopped dead in his tracks. He hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to see his outline, his body tensing. Then he turned and bolted toward the fence. Max lunged after him, barking so loudly it echoed through the whole neighborhood. The guy reached the fence just in time, vaulting over it as Max nearly caught his leg. Once the intruder disappeared into the darkness, Max came bounding back to me, tail still stiff, chest heaving. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around him, shaking. I dragged us both inside, locked every door and window I could find, and pushed a chair up against the back door, even though I knew it wouldn't do much. I didn't call the police. I didn't even tell my mom or sister. I don't know why. I think I was just too scared to talk about it, like saying it out loud would make it real. The next morning, when the sun was out and my mom was home from work, I finally went back outside to close the garage. That's when I saw what the guy had been after. My dad's old toolbox, half open on the floor, tools scattered everywhere. He must have been looking for something valuable, maybe planning to take the whole thing. I locked the garage this time and made sure it stayed that way. I never mentioned it to anyone. It became my secret, something I tried to convince myself hadn't really happened. But I never forgot the sound of Max growling, that low, primal sound that probably saved me that night. Later that day, I walked him to McDonald's, bought him a burger and an ice cream cone, and told him out loud that he was my hero. My boyfriend manages a bunch of restaurants, which means he's often out ridiculously late, sometimes not getting home until 3 a.m. When he's working nights, I usually wait up for him, half asleep on the sofa, in case he needs a bath run or a coffee. It's just habit at this point. This particular night, he calls around 1:15 and says he'll be home in an hour. If I drop you when I'm close, start the bath, yeah? I say sure, hang up, make a mug of tea, and settle back into Netflix. Our block has a security door that locks at 10 p.m. You need a key or someone inside to buzz you in. The building is quiet by that hour. Around 2 a.m., the flat buzzer starts going off. Once, then again, held down like somebody's keeping their finger on it. At first I think someone forgot their key, but it rings my number repeatedly, not the ground floor intercom. And it's the kind of persistent ringing that makes my stomach flip. I pause the show and go to the bedroom window that looks down on the building entrance. There are 5 guys at the gate, big, stocky, and standing too casually for the time of night. One of them is directly in front of the panel, and I see him press only my flat number. My heart drops. Who the hell is buzzing my flat at 2 a.m.? Half of me wants to pick up the phone and yell, "Who are you?" The other half freezes because I'm a small woman, and the thought of calling out into a stairwell at that hour makes my skin crawl. I call my boyfriend. He's still on his way, about 45 minutes out, but promises to ring his dad, Luke, a policeman who lives nearby. "Tell him to come straight over and wait with you," he says. I keep my eye on the gate while I'm on the phone. The buzzer keeps going. Whoever it is deliberately holding it down, as if trying to force someone to open. Luke turns up maybe 10 minutes later. I watch from the window as he walks up, key already in hand. He doesn't hesitate. He approaches the group and starts talking to them. A few minutes pass and Luke opens the main door, walks in, and climbs up to my flat to check I'm okay. I feel a wash of relief so strong I nearly cry. We sit down with terrible tea, and he tells me exactly what he said to them. The men claimed they knew someone in my flat. My main girl lives in 4, and that they'd had nowhere to stay. One of them actually suggests they be let in so we can see her together. Luke told them bluntly no, pointed out that he knew someone in the flat, himself, my boyfriend's dad, and warned them to leave. Apparently, that was the thing that finally made them back off. He told them in no uncertain terms he'd personally see them arrested if they came back, and he threatened to rough them up if they didn't leave. They bolted. Right there. Turned and ran. Luke opened the door for walkthrough to make sure they really were gone and checked the area. He said he felt like they might have been trying the building systematically, buzzing flats to see who answered. But since they'd only been pressing my number, it had the feel of a targeted attempt. The whole thing now makes my stomach flip again. My boyfriend got home soon after, and Luke stayed for a while to make sure we were both okay. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the stairwell had me wide awake. The night felt smaller somehow, like the world outside my door had sharpened into something dangerous for the first time. Looking back, I'm furious at myself for being so naive. I'd thought the buzzer at 2 a.m. would be a drunk neighbor or someone locked out. It wasn't. It was men who'd gone out of their way to buzz only my flat. I still carry that buzzer sound in my head. We changed a couple of habits after that. I stopped waiting up alone all the time, got a little door alarm for the flat, and my boyfriend's dad keeps a spare key on him for emergencies. I'll always be grateful to Luke for showing up when he did. If he hadn't, who knows what might have happened. That summer was supposed to be quiet, just me and my grandparents' house in Spain, sun, work, and a bit of peace while I caught up on overdue college assignments. My friend had come with me at first. She'd just finished university and wanted a summer job out here, but after a few weeks of failed interviews, she decided to head home. My grandparents were due to fly over in 2 weeks, and my cousins a bit later, so I figured I'd stay put rather than waste the ticket. I'd never spent time completely alone in a foreign country before, and I told myself it would be good for me. A little independence, a little focus. Days passed in silence. I didn't know anyone there, couldn't really speak the language, and the only human interaction I got was the occasional smile or nod at the supermarket. By day 10, I'd fallen into a routine. Work, eat, walk, repeat. That day I ran out of groceries and decided to make the short trip to the local store. I was halfway down one of the aisles when a man walking past me said, "Hola." I thought he must have been talking to someone else, but when I glanced up, he was looking straight at me. I smiled politely, then carried on. I noticed him a few more times while I was shopping, at the end of aisles, passing by, glancing my way. It was subtle enough that I couldn't call it anything more than coincidence, but enough to make me slightly uneasy. When I got to the register, I realized he was right in front of me in line. He turned, smiled, and gestured for me to go ahead. It was kind, so I thanked him and stepped forward. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time I paid. Every time I looked back, his gaze was already waiting for mine. I hurried out of the store and began the short walk home, trying to shake off the feeling. As I passed my neighbor's house, a car slowed beside me. I turned, and there he was, the same man from the store. He rolled down the window and started speaking rapidly in Spanish, gesturing for me to get in. I froze. He smiled, motioned toward the passenger seat, and kept talking, faster and louder. I didn't understand much, but I caught words like coche and casa, car, house, and that alone made my stomach twist. I shook my head. No, gracias. No. He kept going, undeterred. I repeated myself louder, waved him off, stepping back from the car. Finally, he frowned, muttered something, and drove away. Slowly, like he wasn't in a hurry to leave. I stood there for a minute, waiting to make sure he was gone before continuing home. I didn't want him to see exactly where I lived. The house was surrounded by a 6-foot wall, with motion sensor lights along the perimeter and bars on every window. My grandparents always said it made the place secure. That night, I was grateful for it. I locked up tight, pulled the shutters, and tried to convince myself that the man had just been overly friendly. Then, at around 3 a.m, the motion sensor light outside the front door flicked on. My bedroom faced that side of the house. It wasn't unusual. The lights sometimes triggered from bugs or stray cats. But then the light outside my window came on, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not quick, casual steps, slow ones, heavy enough to crunch the gravel outside. My body locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. The light went off after a few seconds, and I waited, straining my ears. Then it happened again. Light on, footsteps, silence. Whoever it was, they were right outside my room. I stayed frozen under the blanket, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my head. After what felt like forever, the lights went dark and didn't come on again. I didn't move until the sun started coming through the shutters. When it was finally light enough, I got up and checked the locks. Everything was still secure. No broken windows, no sign of forced entry. But that didn't make me feel better. I called my parents the moment it was late enough in their time zone. They immediately reached out to family friends who lived nearby, and within hours, I was packed and staying at their house. I spent the next 3 nights there, waiting for my grandparents to arrive. Nothing else happened, but I couldn't shake that image. A man's shadow just outside my window, waiting, listening. I still don't know if it was the same guy from the supermarket, but it feels too connected to be a coincidence. I'm grateful my grandparents' house was built like a fortress, but that night changed something in me. I used to love the quiet. Now, silence feels like the scariest sound in the world. This happened right after New Year's in 2011. I was 17, a senior in high school, and home alone for the first time in my life. My parents had gone out of state to visit my grandparents, but since I had exams and papers coming up, I stayed behind. Normally, they'd never leave me alone for that long. 9 days, in the middle of nowhere, with no siblings around, but I insisted I'd be fine. I wasn't. Our house sat on 10 acres of land in rural Tennessee, surrounded by woods and long stretches of nothing. It was peaceful usually, the kind of quiet where you can hear every leaf rustle outside your window. That night, I was in bed around 2 a.m., texting a friend and half watching YouTube, when our 3 Labradors went ballistic. It wasn't their usual something's outside bark. It was deeper, louder, panicked. I figured it was probably a raccoon or a deer, maybe even a coyote, since we got those sometimes. They stopped after a minute or two, and I went back to scrolling. But maybe 5 minutes later, I heard a noise that made my stomach drop. It sounded like a window sliding open, the one in the downstairs bedroom right below mine. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I was just tired. But then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking up the wooden stairs that led straight to my room. I froze. My door was right next to the top of the stairs. If whoever it was came up, they'd be right outside it in seconds. Without making a sound, I reached over and turned the lock. Then I texted my friend. "Someone's in my house. Call 911. I sat there, heart pounding, barely breathing, listening to the sounds of drawers opening, things falling, the faint clatter of dishes. Whoever was inside wasn't trying to be quiet. They were going through the kitchen and living room, opening every cabinet, every drawer, even ripping open a trash bag and dumping it out on the floor. The 911 dispatcher tried calling my phone. but I didn't dare answer. I was too scared they'd hear the vibration or my voice. My friend stayed on the line with them instead, relaying everything I typed. I told him what I could hear, what I thought was happening. The footsteps moved farther away, then back again. At one point, I heard the floorboards right outside my door creak. I covered my mouth with my hand, praying they wouldn't try the knob. After a few agonizing minutes, the footsteps started moving downstairs again. Then, silence. No barking, no footsteps, nothing. I didn't move for 40 minutes, just sat there shaking, my phone clutched in my hand, tears running down my face. When I finally saw the flashing lights from the police cars through my window, I nearly cried with relief. They tapped on my bedroom window to let me know it was safe, and when I opened my door to let them in, something strange happened. The security alarm went off. It had been armed the entire time. The siren blared so loud it made me jump, and that's when the officer told me something that still freaks me out. The only window in the whole house that didn't have an alarm sensor was the one I'd heard open, the one right below my room. The sensor had fallen off recently, and my dad hadn't gotten around to fixing it. Whoever broke in knew exactly where to go. The police didn't find anything missing. Whoever it was hadn't come for valuables. They just rummaged through things, like they were searching for something specific. The window was left wide open, curtain fluttering in the cold air. A few days later, my neighbor called to say their house had been broken into too. Same thing. Nothing taken, just searched through. To this day, I don't know who it was or what they wanted. No one was ever caught. I still think about that night, about how the dogs were trying to warn me, and how easily things could have gone worse if I hadn't locked that door. When my parents got home, I didn't sleep for days. I used to love being alone in the house. Now, even silence makes my heart race. This happened when I was around 12 or 13, living in a quiet rural area with only a few houses scattered down our road, each separated by big stretches of woods. It was one of those neighborhoods where you could go all day without seeing anyone, and that usually made me feel safe. But that changed one afternoon when I stayed home sick from school. Both my parents worked full-time, so I was used to being on my own from early morning until late afternoon. I actually liked it, watching TV in pajamas, making soup, and having the whole house to myself. That day started off no different. Around 1 in the afternoon, though, I heard a knock on the front door. I didn't think much of it at first, and ignored it. I was too tired to move, and my parents had always told me never to open the door to strangers when I was home alone. But the knocking came again, louder this time, so I got up and peeked out my bedroom window upstairs. A man was standing there, leaning toward the small window beside the front door, trying to look inside. He had a pickup truck parked in our driveway with a company logo on the side. I recognized it. The exterminator. We'd had him come by a few times before, but my mom hadn't mentioned he was scheduled for today. That instantly made me uneasy. Still, I figured maybe she'd forgotten to tell me. I decided not to answer and hoped he'd just leave. But as I was heading to the kitchen to grab some water, I saw movement outside the back window, and there he was again. He had walked around the house to the back deck and was now peering through the windows, hands cupped around his face to block the glare. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just checking something. He was looking inside. I ducked behind the wall, holding my breath. He moved slowly along the deck, stopping to glance through different windows. It felt like forever before he finally disappeared from view. I carefully peeked out again, and his truck was still there. The living room in our house had big glass doors leading into a sunroom that opened onto the deck. I was just about to turn away when I froze. He was inside the sunroom. I crouched behind a coffee table, terrified he was going to try the handle next. My cat, Scooter, was sitting by the glass door staring at him, fur puffed up, hissing. The man noticed her, smiled strangely, and leaned closer. That's when I jumped up, my voice shaking as I said through the glass, "You can't be in there." He turned his head, startled, then smiled like nothing was wrong. "Oh, hi," he said casually. "You're Emma, right?" My blood went cold. I had no idea how he knew my name. I hesitated and said, "Yeah, how do you know me?" He grinned. "I know your parents. Can I come in and inspect?" I said quickly, "They're not home." He looked me up and down for a second, then said, "All right, I'll come back another time." His tone was light, but something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I just wanted him gone, so I nodded and closed the door. I ran upstairs and peeked from the window. He got into his truck but didn't leave right away. He sat there, staring at the house for almost 2 full minutes before finally driving off down the road. I called my mom right after and asked if she'd scheduled the exterminator. She hadn't. When I told her what happened, she sounded alarmed and told me to lock every door and window until she got home. That evening, I explained everything again. How he knew my name, how he'd gone around the back, and even stepped into the sunroom. My mom said she vaguely remembered that same exterminator from a visit months earlier, but there was no way he should have known my name, and she definitely hadn't called him that day. She contacted the company he supposedly worked for, and they said no one was scheduled to visit our address. We never found out who that man really was. He never came back, and we never saw that truck again. But for years afterward, whenever someone knocked on the door, I'd freeze for a second, half expecting to see that same man standing there, smiling like he already knew me.